Okay, we'll get started here. Thank you so much once again, everybody, for joining us for our criminal law panel. I am the Associate Director of Admissions at Villanova Law. My name is Phil Harrinarine. I'm also a 2017 graduate of the law school. Looking forward to getting to chat with you all today. We really are here more than anything to answer your questions, to spread some information about our criminal law offerings, but to get to answer your questions because we want you to all be informed when you're making the decision as to where you should be attending law school in the fall. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists so that they can introduce themselves. But one thing I will ask you all to do is that throughout this presentation, if you have any questions whatsoever, please go ahead and use the Q&A box. We're going to ask that you use that box because it's easier for us to keep track of the questions that are going to come in. And we're going to, just in a little bit after we do introductions, type our email addresses out into the chat box, just so that if moving forward you have any questions, if you'd like to reach out to somebody directly, you can do so. You can also email me first. And I can always connect you later on if that'll be easier. So I'm going to turn it over to our professors to start. And I will start with Professor Dempsey and then Professor Chanson. You can go. And then Matt, afterwards, you can introduce yourself as well. Thank you all.
All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone. My name is Michelle Madden Dempsey. I've been at Villanova for now 12 years. Before that, I taught in England at University of Oxford. I concentrate on issues of criminal law and philosophy. I was an actual criminal lawyer back in the day. I practiced as a prosecutor at the beginning of my career. And then I also practiced as a civil litigator. I'm from the Chicago area. That's where I did my practice work in Illinois. And I currently teach substantive criminal law, which is a first semester course that everyone has to take. So you might have me if you come to Villanova. And then I also teach evidence, which is not strictly required, but it's a course that everyone should have, especially if you're interested in criminal law. And then depending on the year, I also teach seminars either in advanced criminal law or sexuality and law. Sometimes I teach jurisprudence, I taught race and law, I've taught gender and law. And then I also serve as the faculty advisor for the Villanova Law Institute to address commercial sexual exploitation. So thank you very much for coming today.
My name is Steve Chanenson. I'm also a professor at Villanova Law. I've been here a bit longer than Professor Dempsey, but we teach in very much the same area. Primarily all things criminal. I also teach criminal law for 1Ls. I teach criminal procedure. These days I'm teaching criminal procedure adjudication, which is things that happen inside the courtroom. But in the past, I've also taught criminal procedure investigation, cops and robbers, searches, things along those lines. I also teach a variety of courses concerning criminal sentencing. That's where a lot of my work and scholarship are focused. I'm teaching a course this semester on pretrial release and detention. You might think about it as bail, but also in the immigration context, working with one of our immigration colleagues. And in addition, I've taught courses such as law and the Holocaust. I'll probably be teaching professional responsibility, which focuses on legal ethics, which makes some sense as I'm also the faculty director of the Girard-diCarlo Center for Ethics, Integrity, and Compliance. Like Professor Dempsey, I'm also from the Chicago area. Apparently, if you're going to teach criminal law at Villanova, you need to be from Chicago. And I was a prosecutor back in a former life. I was an assistant U.S. attorney in Chicago. And I do a lot of law reform work. I am the current chair of the State Committee on Criminal Jury Instructions. I spent more than 14 years on the State Sentencing Commission, and in fact, I testified in front of that commission just earlier today. So I'm thrilled that you're all here and look forward to chatting.
Go ahead, Matt.
Hey everyone, my name is Matt Lindenmuth, class of 2020. I am currently an assistant district attorney in Manhattan, so we cover all of New York County. And then, yeah, so that's my brief bio.
I'll turn it over to our students. Noel, you can go first. Destynee, you can go afterwards. And if you just want to describe maybe where you went to college and briefly what you did during your summers. I know we're going to get into some of your experiential learning a bit later on, but just maybe even career aspirations, what you're looking to do after you graduate from law school.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Noel. I'm a 2L, so I'm a second year. I actually went to Villanova for undergrad as well. And between undergrad and law school, I worked at the Pennsylvania Prison Society for a brief period of time. I still volunteer and work with them as well. What else was I supposed to say, Phil? Oh, my summer. So last summer was my first summer in law school. I spent it at the Bucks County Office of the Public Defender, which is a really great experience. And this summer, I'm going to be at the Institutional Law Project in Pittsburgh, working remotely for them. And yeah, I think that did I get everything? Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Destynee Speaks. I'm a 2L at Villanova. Undergrad, I went to Syracuse University up in upstate New York. Before law school, I took 2 years off before law school, and I worked with the Office of Chief Counsel in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I was a legal assistant to 7 assistant counsel in that office. And last summer, I actually worked with an organization, it's a nonprofit, Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, doing different things such as criminal record expungement and assisting clients through the Pennsylvania pardon process.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that, everybody. I'm going to throw my email address right now into the chat box. Destynee and Noel, if I can ask you both to do that as well. I can serve as a bit of a point of contact moving forward if anybody on today's panel would like to be in contact with Matt or Professors Chanenson or Dempsey, and I can always connect you all afterwards as well if you'd like to further learn more about what they're doing currently, what they've done in their past. But please feel free to reach out to either student as they're more than willing to share with you all about their experiences as Villanova Law students and sort of what they've been able to do here as students in the criminal law realm. Professors Chanson and Dempsey, I'm going to come to you all for this first question, which relates to course offerings in the criminal law practice area at Villanova. Professor Chanson mentioned that he teaches first year criminal law, a bit of a throwback. He was my criminal law professor many moons ago. Professor Dempsey taught me sexuality in the law through a seminar paper course in my third year. And so that plus more, what are the types of classes that individuals thinking that they want to get into criminal law and or reform work should be taking, should be considering? I know the first year is usually a very set in stone year where you will take criminal law, but then moving into your second and third year, what types of tracks and sorts of courses should people be thinking and considering for themselves afterwards?
Should I start here or? Okay. All right. So there are a lot of courses you can take at Villanova regarding criminal law. As we've already said a few times, the first semester that you have to take is substantive criminal law. That's the course that teaches you about the different elements of different crimes and sort of basic animating principles of the criminal law system. And then there are courses called criminal procedure. Professor Chanenson has taught both of those, and he mentioned one that he's currently teaching. Let me go in order. Criminal procedure 1 is what I believe Professor Chanenson referred to as cops and robbers. It deals with issues around search and seizure, illegal searches, evidence that gets suppressed because it was improperly obtained by the police. So Fourth Amendment kinds of issues. And then also issues around Fifth Amendment and Miranda rights and self-incrimination rights. And then a host of other issues that sort of deal with the investigative process. So that's called Criminal Procedure 1 investigations. And then you move into criminal procedure 2, which is the adjudications. It's sort of how does a criminal case get into court and how does it make its way through the criminal legal system? I'll leave it to Professor Chanenson to elaborate on the various topics that are covered in that precise course. But those 3 courses, I would say, make up the core of criminal law, such that if you were interested in practicing criminal law, you'd certainly take all of those. The criminal procedure courses are both electives, but almost everyone takes them, even if they're not planning on practicing criminal law, because they're on the bar exam. And they're just good to know, cocktail party stuff. And then there's evidence, which I teach. Again, it's on the bar exam. Almost everyone takes it, even if they don't want to be a litigator. But it's extremely important to take if you do want to get into criminal law, because it provides you the framework for being able to go into court, which is extremely important for your externships during your experience in law school. You'll actually have the opportunity to go into court and to argue a case, either on behalf of a prosecution office or on behalf of a defender's office, or perhaps with a firm. But certainly there are a lot of people who work in prosecutor's office and public defender offices for their externships. You can also do an in-house trial advocacy course that focuses especially on criminal law. So that's another great course to take if you're interested in this area. Professor Chanenson runs a fantastic sentencing workshop. You'll soon know, he's incredibly modest, and he is one of the, if not the leading sentencing expert in the world. I mean, he's really like that you could come to Villanova Law and study criminal law sentencing with Steve Chanenson is a big deal. And his sentencing workshop, if you can get into it, it's very popular. But if you can get a spot, it's really an amazing experience where I'll allow him to go into the details, but I've never heard anything but absolute raves about it. And it's an opportunity to work directly with judges and practitioners and real cases and really do the work of lawyers and judges. There's also the pretrial detention course, which Professor Chanenson mentioned. I'll allow him to go into that more in detail. There's a course that we offer called Crimmigration at the intersection of criminal law and immigration law, which is extremely important, especially if you're going to be a public defender or a defense attorney of any sort, so that you understand the immigration implications for your client with respect to their engagement with the criminal justice system. There's a course called Criminal Justice, Race, and the Media, which is a really interesting course that allows you to look at issues of criminal law through a different lens. It's less doctrinal, it's less sort of black letter law focused than a lot of courses, but it allows you to take more of a 20,000, 30,000 foot view of how the political and social structures we live in inform the workings of the criminal legal system. There are also courses on white collar crime, which Professor Chanson has also taught, and crime and technology. There's a special course on crime victims that we recently added. There are specialized courses concerning particular kinds of crimes. For example, we have a course on human trafficking, which deals not only with sex trafficking, but labor trafficking as well. And then there's also a course on international criminal law, which in many respects is more of an international law focus than a traditional criminal law focus. It's really quite a different thing than domestic criminal law, but you can certainly take that as well. And then, as I mentioned, there's an advanced criminal law course I teach where you can just explore any issue related to criminal law that piques your interest, and you can write a research paper on that topic. So I'll popcorn to Professor Chanenson to fill in the gaps of anything that I missed.
As usual, no gaps to fill. There are a lot of opportunities that run the gamut, as Professor Dempsey said, from kind of the core foundational doctrinal classes to the more specialized. And some of the more specialized will focus on issues that kind of bleed into policy questions, although policy, of course, is interwoven throughout all of these courses. And then there are some, as Professor Dempsey said, that are really aimed at helping to get you practice ready if prosecuting or defending is what you want to do. So I would put criminal procedure adjudication in that camp. While not everybody who takes it wants to be a prosecutor or a defense attorney, lots of people do, and we really get into the weeds of what does it mean to be a prosecutor or defense attorney, and what are their responsibilities, and how is it that a case makes its way through the system. So it's all fun, and it's really remarkable, I think, the scope and the breadth and the depth. And while I think we'll defer discussion to the sentencing workshop for a little bit, that's not the only sentencing course that we offer, and you're not even always stuck with me teaching the sentencing course. We have a federal judge who comes in and focuses very much on federal sentencing, which I think is a great experience and opportunity as well. So there are a lot of ways to come at this. And the last thing I'll put in a little plug for, and I can do so with a clean conscience because I'm not teaching it these days, So it's not just asking you to take another class with me, but Professor Dempsey mentioned corporate and white collar crime. And right now that's Professor Nelson teaching that class. And what I think is so terrific about that is it's really a bridge class. I've had students come back to me years later talking about how, well, I didn't really end up practicing criminal law directly, but in my civil practice, there was an issue that came up about money laundering, and I was able to understand the contours of it and know how to direct my client because we had gone through those issues. And all you have to do is pick up the paper to see the enduring importance of corporate and white collar crime. So there's more, but I think that gives you a flavor of the kinds of courses that we have on offer in this realm.
More than, and I appreciate you all going so in depth. That's definitely very helpful. I think the flip side to course offerings within the classroom would be experiential learning. And I want our students to share about, what they've been able to participate in at the law school. Of course, externships external to the law school, where you're able to do things out in, I guess, the real world, right? You're getting your hands, you're getting your feet wet in real practical work experience. But at the same time, clinical opportunities at the law school may in some way, shape, or form also expose you to this type of work and sort of a way as well. So I'll start with Destynee this time. If you would like to share about the experiential learning opportunities you've been a part of so far, maybe have planned coming up for this summer. And then afterwards, Noel, please feel free to do the same. Noel, I'm going to ask you to hold off on chatting about the sentencing workshop for the question later on. Thank you.
So to be completely honest, the externships at Villanova were personally my favorite because I really I love learning the law, but for me, I really like talking to a person and being able to speak to someone and not just be in the books constantly. So I was super excited when I was able to get experiential learning. So last semester, as I said, I worked with Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity. So I worked with them through the summer and then as well as the fall semester. And I love that. And currently I am working with the Defender Association of Philadelphia. And as Professor Dempsey mentioned, I did take evidence last semester. So I am now a certified legal intern and I get to represent clients in Philadelphia courts. So we work with clients and represent them in the preliminary hearing stage as well as in the trial stage. So it's very interesting getting this exposure, even only being a 2L, I get to work with many different people, see many different cases, and do that alongside actual defense attorneys.
And if I can just jump in for a second, one thing that we do that I'm not sure how distinctive it is, but I think it's an important component is we don't just send you out to a field placement. I mean, this is something that, yes, there's a structured program at the Defender Association, but you still have folks back home at the law school who work with you, you check in with. We have Professor Matt McGovern, who supervises all of our experiential learning, where there are various ongoing opportunities for reflection. And then if you're lucky, you'll get Professor Dempsey to supervise your externship. If you're unlucky, like Ms. Speaks, you'll get me supervising the externship. But it's an opportunity to not only get in there and get your feet wet, but also to remember that you're still in school. And so we take a step back and intentionally kind of add some of that distance and say, okay, what did you see that you liked? What didn't you like? How does this reflect on the things that you've already learned? So it's not the same as just go and get a part-time job. It really is designed to still be a structured educational opportunity.
Yeah, I'll go off of what Destynee said as well. I have really enjoyed having the experiential learning part of it. It does really add to the classroom, I think. So last summer, I said I was at Bucks County Public Defender's Office. So at that point, I wasn't a certified legal intern yet. So a lot of what I did was client interviewing, a lot of client interaction, which was still a really, really good experience. Just speaking to real people, having to explain the law, explain their charges. And then in the fall, I took criminal procedure adjudication with Professor Chanenson, and it was really a nice balance because now I had this real world experience. Like, okay, I've seen what it looks like, all these different things. And so it's really, I think the more that type of work you can do, it's so complementary to what you're doing in the classroom. And it makes it so much more meaningful, I think, to have when we're talking about things in class. I can picture that because I did that, in the summer. And then this semester, I'm in the civil justice clinic at the law school, which is one of the clinics that the law school offers. So right now I have 4 clients of my own. So you work on their case from start to finish, and you have a lot of supervision with the attorneys that are in the clinic, but it's really your own case. You make decisions, and that's really great experience as well. And we have multiple clinics at the law school. This one is the civil justice clinic. So I have an estates case, a custody case, so it's not related to criminal law, but one of my clients has pretty rough criminal charges. And so, a lot of criminal law plays into other areas of law. So still kind of getting exposed to that side as well. And in the summer, I'll be at the Institutional Law Project, which is a nonprofit organization. They focus on litigation around prison conditions. So my background is in that type of work, so I'm really excited for that. And yeah, along with what Professor Chanenson said, they don't just kind of throw you out to get a job. There's really a lot of support. Even over the summer, we had check-ins with Professor McGovern and things like that. So it's very structured, and you're very supported through your internship, which I think is nice.
And
Well, I share that. Oh, go ahead, Professor Dempsey, go ahead.
I was going to just jump in for a second to say that in addition to the great range and substance of the externships that we have, we also have a lot of practitioners coming into the law school to teach courses as well. So, as brilliant and wonderful as my colleague, Professor Chanenson is, we're professors. That's primarily our job. But a lot of the people you get to take courses with are also primarily practicing attorneys. They're out there, they're working their cases, and then they're coming to teach primarily at night. So you wouldn't have them in your first year, but for your electives, there's a good opportunity to really meet with people who are currently in the trenches doing the work. One example that pops to mind is the course that I'd mentioned on crime victims is taught by Stuart Ryan, who was co-lead counsel in the prosecution of the Bill Cosby case. And that happened in our backyard. And he comes to Villanova and teaches a course in crime victims. And he's still a practicing attorney. He's no longer prosecuting, but he's representing victims of sexual violence in civil suits now. And I believe also Professor Chanenson may be able to speak to this more, but the crime and technology course is also taught by an adjunct practicing attorney.
Absolutely. A longtime local assistant U.S. attorney. He's actually just left the prosecutor's office, but in some ways that actually makes it even more interesting because he has his decades of experience as a prosecutor, and now he's working as a defense attorney. And he really is on the cutting edge of a lot of issues of crime and technology, now representing primarily victims of various forms of cyber attacks and ransomware and things that he used to prosecute. Now he's working a little bit of criminal defense, but it's primarily working with victims of it. So you really do have opportunities to pursue, frankly, any aspect of the criminal justice system or things attendant to it.
Before I go to Matt for this next set of questions, I do want to encourage our attendees to feel comfortable and confident to put your questions into the Q&A box if you have any. You have great resources at your disposal during this webinar, so I want to make sure that you get to ask them the questions that you have. We're going to get to questions a little bit later on, but even from now, if something's said that sparks a thought or a question on your end, whether it's for our professors, our alum, or for Destynee or Noel, please feel free to throw them into the Q&A box.
Phil, you're on mute.
Was I on mute this whole time?
You encouraged everyone to post in the Q&A, and then you click mute before going into the next
gosh, sorry about that, everybody. Thank you for letting me know. So the question I want to ask, Matt, is when you think back and you sort of hear about what Noelle and Destynee are saying about their experiences as students at the law school, what sorts of opportunities did you take advantage of? What sorts of opportunities did you want to take advantage of that sort of led you to the role that you're in right now? And then after that, if you'd like to just sort of break down for us what you enjoy most about being an ADA in Manhattan. I think the thought of sort of working in such a busy area with such high profile cases at times is a really wonderful thought for a lot of the attendees on this panel. So just give us a breakdown of the law school experience and then also currently what your role looks like.
Cool. So first, I am 100% like Destynee. If I can avoid being in the classroom doing academic work as much as possible, that's what I'm going to do. So I took advantage of a lot of the experiential learning opportunities, and I'll talk a little bit more about like clinics and stuff later, because I know we have some questions on that. But I joined the trial team my summer going into 2L year. And that's really where I found out that I wanted to be in the courtroom. I really enjoy having to think on my feet, kind of coming up with things on the fly. I'm a huge procrastinator, so I was already doing that anyway. So now at least I could do it and get some credit for it. But I really enjoyed that. But since we do have to go to class, since it is school, I also really enjoyed corporate and white collar crime that Professor Chanenson mentioned earlier with Professor Nelson. It actually solidified what I want to do. Maybe not right now as a regular line ADA, but moving forward in my career is to prosecute white collar crimes and get involved in that sort of work, because I think that's something that really interests me, starting an investigation from the ground up and then taking it all the way through prosecution and potential trial is something that fascinates me. So that's really where I want to go. So doing corporate and white collar crime and then taking law of investigations, which I don't know if the school offers anymore. But taking those two classes really pushed me towards where I want to go. And then where I'm at, the Manhattan DA's office. So I have a cop out first. My favorite thing is the people who I work with. It's fantastic. The environment here, my office mates in the background are fist pumping. It's fine. And you might have saw one earlier in the corner. We actually have a Mardi Gras mask for some reason on the wall. It was like in the background. I had to have them take it away at the last minute. But the environment that we have is really good. It's a really collegial environment. I hate that term, but like we have a softball team that we have in our trial bureau. We get together, we talk, we hang out. It's really a close group of friends that I've developed that I didn't think I was going to, at least so quickly. Just really what I enjoy. But as far as the actual work goes, is that it's never boring. There are a million fires that I have to put out at all times, and I'm never doing the same thing once, and I get to be in the courtroom. And that's really what drew me to criminal law to begin with, and taking the trial team like I talked about is getting in the courtroom, have to think on my feet, developing a case from the ground up. And luckily for me at the Manhattan DA's office, we do vertical prosecution. So from the time the case is written up to the time the case is at trial, it's my case. And I am the head law enforcement person on a large number of cases. At one point this summer, it was right around 200. Now it's a lot more manageable. But that is my favorite thing, is not having to do the same thing over and over again, like maybe being stuck in a basement doing doc review, like some of my friends who graduated around this time.
Thanks so much, Matt. Professor Dempsey, next week, Tuesday, and I'm going to put in a plug for this really quickly by throwing the link into the chat box for everybody. Next week, Tuesday at 5 o'clock, we have a panel, a webinar just like this for the CSE Institute. So we're going to get in depth with that next week, Tuesday, but I wanted to sort of preface that a little bit and ask you to just share about what the Institute to Address Commercial Sexual Exploitation does, sort of the mission of the organization. I know that you're co-founder as well. And so just sort of the ways in which students can get involved and sort of the type of work that they've been able to do now over the last few years.
Great. All right. So the Institute started about 7.5 years ago. And as the name suggests, it's an institute to address commercial sexual exploitation. So some people might characterize that as sort of sex trafficking, but the point is that it's meant to embrace a broader range of exploitation in the commercial sex industry, in addition to sex trafficking. So the basic idea is a lot of people who are involved in the commercial sex industry are being exploited, and they should not be treated as criminals. And so that is the considered view of the people who are running the Institute, and we're working to decriminalize people who are involved in selling commercial sex. The people who, the director and then the fellows and the students working in the Institute have been tremendously successful in drafting legislation, advocating for its enactment, training police and prosecutors and judges so that they start to view these cases through a different lens. And so that's that's probably the bulk of the work. It's policy work, it's legislative work, it's advocacy work that sort of in some respects, any nonprofit might be doing, but we're doing it in a university context. So there's also a strong educational focus, both to our students and to the greater community. And then in recent years, last few years, we've also started providing direct services to survivors to get their criminal records expunged or vacated, and then to assist them with any other legal matters that they may have by enrolling the assistance of of pro bono attorneys who are able to assist them in those other matters. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
Awesome. And then once again, like I said, I put a link into the chat box for everybody. So you can go ahead to our website, and the Zoom link will be there for next Tuesday's panel. But we'd love to have you, the director of that, of the Institute, our fellow for the Institute, as well as a current extern, a current student, will be present speaking about the CSE Institute, all that it has to offer, the different experience and exposure that you'll be able to have as a student at Villanova Law, doing great work alongside them. We heard a lot about the sentence.
And let me just jump in for just half a second, because there's one other, I think, really great thing the Institute did recently that Professor Dempsey alluded to, but I think it's worth a few sentences, which is they recently represented an individual on a full-blown clemency petition in Pennsylvania before the Board of Pardons. So that touches on some of the kinds of things that Ms. Speaks was doing with Pulse in Philadelphia. And what I love about it is every once in a while, I get to poke my nose into some of the fun things that the Institute is doing. And it was really students taking the lead on that clemency petition that touches on some of the things that I do otherwise. So I was able to kind of give my 2 cents, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful resource here at the law school.
I'm going to come straight to you for the next question, Professor Chanenson, which is to sort of help us better understand the sentencing workshop at Villanova Law. If you could give us a brief overview of it and what the workshop is. I'd also ask Destynee, or I guess Noel, to jump in so you can describe your experiences in the workshop thus far and the exposure that you've had working with Professor Chanenson.
So the Villanova Sentencing Workshop is a joint effort between Villanova Law School and the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing and the Administrative Office of the Pennsylvania Courts. So it's an opportunity that brings together about a dozen students, about a half a dozen sitting trial judges from all across Pennsylvania, as well as local prosecutors, district attorneys, correctional experts, members of our parole board, and others. And what we do is we get together for 2 multi-day sessions at the Inn at Villanova, which is just down the road from the law school. And we spend that time really digging in deeply to real cases that the judges have provided that they found either interesting or difficult to sentence. So while it is not a true clinical experience, because of course the sentence has already been imposed, this is about as close as you can get when it comes to sentencing. So you'll get hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands of pages of documents. So unlike a lot of your doctrinal classes where you get a neat little sanitized appellate opinion, you're going to read the police report and the victim statement and trial transcripts and psychological reports, things that are often highly confidential and not available to anybody other than the parties or the judge. Obviously, they're redacted and confidentiality rules apply. And then everyone sentences the case in advance. And what we find is that even using the same facts and the same law, people are all over the place. So it's really an opportunity to dig into the way in which sentencing discretion operates in practice. And it is truly 360-degree learning. The judges learn from the students certainly learn from the judges, and the lawyers, I learned from everybody. And the judges, in fact, get special judicial education credit for it, and the head of education for Pennsylvania courts refers to it as graduate school in sentencing. So it's a fun opportunity to get about as close as you can to actually sentencing without being a judge. I don't know. Now, Ms. Gambale, you'll tell me, am I completely wrong about this? It's possible.
No. I want to find like the perfect adjective to describe. So I've done the first of the weekend sessions for the sentencing project back in February, and the next one is next week actually already. And it's real. I mean, everything Professor Chanson said is probably one of the coolest experience I've ever had. It really is such in-depth learning, and it's very unique. I don't know where you'd get another experience like that. Like Professor Chanson said, it's not a clinic, but you have every document that a judge would have. And it's very eye-opening. It was very eye-opening for me, especially hearing a lot in some of the cases, the judges that actually did sentence the individuals are there. And so you get to, you read the case, you have your own opinion, you go in with a very strong opinion, and then you get more context, like, why did the judge sentence that way? And it really changes your views, and you can see how one case can have so many differing opinions with, like Professor Chanson said, the same law, the same everything. And it's exciting. Like they're long days, but you're doing a lot of talking, but there is not a moment I don't think my attention wasn't had by somebody in the room. And it's a great experience. And if you have any interest in criminal law, it's fascinating and great networking, great experience, and just really eye-opening. And I love it. So yeah, everything you said.
And we do feed you, so you got that going for you.
There's a whole thing of
M&Ms.
The whole M&M thing. It was all M&Ms. I had a bowl of M&Ms, but yeah.
Absolutely. I have to go on a starvation diet as soon as it's over. The other thing I'll tell you that's I think a really great opportunity is you as students, you're going toe-to-toe and on an even level with these judges and members of the parole board. And we have an elected district attorney. Sometimes we have assistant district attorneys. We've got a very prominent elected district attorney this year. And everybody's on the same level. And frankly, that's part of the learning experience for the judges. Trial judges are used to being in charge, right? Yeah, there's the appellate court that'll come along every once in a while and tell them that they did something wrong. But in the courtroom, very few people are able to say, well, wait a minute, judge, you just imposed this sentence. Why did you do that? Why didn't you think about it this way? And part of that is my job to set up those interactions. But as the students become comfortable in the setting, then they start doing it. And it's really a great opportunity, again, for the students to have the experience of interacting that way with the judges, but also for the judges to have to stop and think about first principles that they haven't had to think about in a while. And the meals are there on purpose because from my perspective, they're also an educational component. Yeah, it's not part of the structured session, but a lot of important things happen over the bucket of M&Ms where you're talking with this judge and having a follow-on conversation. And absolutely from a networking perspective, I've had students get jobs out of this. It's not a guarantee, of course, but also then, especially if they're practicing in any of those counties, they now have a connection with a lawyer or a judge, and more than just a superficial connection. So it's been a lot of fun. We've been doing it for a while now, and I enjoy it.
I appreciate you both being so enthusiastic about it. I really think that our attendees are going to have maybe some questions about this after today, but also we'll be wanting to take advantage of the opportunity moving forward as well. Matt, I know that you mentioned a little bit earlier that, of course, you were involved in a clinic at the law school, the civil justice clinic. And I wanted to ask you how you would describe the clinic, the work that you did in the clinic, and the way in which it's prepared you for your current role as an ADA. And then also, I guess a follow-up question would be, when you think back to your time at Villanova, maybe hearing about the different opportunities that are being discussed today, do you feel as though there's something that you wish you had done or taken advantage of that maybe you didn't, looking back now, as maybe a bit of advice for those considering Villanova to make sure that they put that on their bucket list, to make sure that they do while they're here?
Sounds good. Offering sage wisdom makes me feel old. I still haven't hit 30, so I'm okay. But yeah, so starting out with the civil justice clinic. So I did that my spring of my 3L year after interning at 2 different DA's offices. So it was kind of a curveball. But I really thought it was important to develop more skills to make myself a well-rounded lawyer. I really felt that at the civil justice clinic, I developed some of those soft skills. As an intern at a prosecutor's office, you're doing a lot of like case law research. You might get handed a case, like, hey, go watch this trial, go watch this hearing, or maybe go participate in this hearing if you're a certified legal intern. But in the civil justice clinic, you get your own cases. So I got to represent 2 different people. My case, I got to make most of the decisions, obviously with the help of the professor who's running the clinic. But one of my cases actually went all the way to an eviction hearing, and I got to argue during that hearing why my client shouldn't have been evicted. And they didn't get evicted, and that was arguably one of the most rewarding things I've done since I started working in the legal profession in general. So I really felt like the civil justice clinic helped me develop the organizational skills of running your own case, and also just those soft skills. So like interviewing a witness, speaking with opposing counsel, speaking with a judge, just kind of figuring out your place in this entire kind of realm of things, and also kind of developing my own personality as a lawyer. When I was interning, I watched a lot of TV shows and thought I would be like this big dramatic person making this like last salient point to turn the tide, and it's really not that at all. So that was really good for me to learn as well before I started working. And then something that I wish I would have done during law school, and I swear Professor Chanenson isn't paying me to say this, I wish I would have done his sentencing workshop. I really think it's important, especially with my role as a prosecutor, is trying to find a fair sentence for defendants, trying to find a fair plea for a defendant. And I think the sentencing workshop probably would have helped me develop some skills that would have been very useful when I started out. And then also I wish I would have taken Crim Pro, because I had to teach myself Crim Pro while I was interning. So that was fun.
I want to ask our students really quickly to just describe the ways in which you've gotten involved at Villanova outside of the classroom. Just the things like student organizations, different experiences, the ways in which you've been able to find community at the law school. I know that for a lot of our attendees, finding a community that fits for them, finding a place where they can sort of be home, away from home, really matters. And so just describe for a little bit, maybe some of the student organizations or ways that you've been able to find yourself at home at Villanova Law. Destynee, I'll start with you, and then we can go to Noel.
Yeah, the organizations at Villanova are a big part of that, what made me really feel comfortable at Villanova. I'm currently on the board of BALSA, which is a Black Law Student Association, as well as non-criminal related, but the Labor and Employment Law Society. I'm also on the board of the Villanova Parent and Non-Traditional Group. And so one thing that I really love about all these different groups is that within each group, I have similarities for different reasons. So like in VPNG, which is the parent and non-traditional students, we all come from a similar background. Like we're maybe didn't have a law, our family members maybe didn't come from like the legal profession, or maybe their parents, or maybe they have different things that separate us from, let's say, the general law school population, so we can relate on that end. BALSA and also like LAWSA and other ethnic kind of organizations, you can share that with a group of people. And then also with the labor and employment, that's just another interest that I have. I'm able to share that interest with that group. So within all these different little sectors, I have people that are similar to me and that I can just talk to, get to know, and just like debrief from the classroom.
Sure. So I think the biggest community I would say I'm a part of that's been really impactful for me is the Public Interest Scholars Program that I'm a part of at Villanova. There's a group of 5 of us. We had interviewed for the program before we even came to Villanova Law. And so we've been very close ever since, which was nice. I kind of came in with a group of students that I knew before even the first day. So it was really nice to have a familiar face. I'm also, I guess, criminally law related. Vice president of the Criminal Law Society and the Juvenile Law Society, which do a lot of work, just a lot of education work, advocacy work, networking around criminal law. And I think the criminal law community, I feel like at Villanova is I see a lot of the same students at like the sentencing workshop at different events. which is really nice because you see the same faces in classes and things like that. And I think it's a nice little community at Villanova, actually, thinking about it, especially my year, tend to know like Destynee and people I've had classes with. And then I guess another weird one that isn't, I don't know, I'm in the JD MPA program at Villanova. So I'm doing the public administration master's degree. So that's like another group of students that I've gotten to know that are doing either the MPA program or they have a joint MBA program for business. So kind of just that camaraderie of students doing both degrees has been a little nook as well that I've met. But I think Villanova in general is pretty welcoming. I mean, it's not a huge building. Everyone's in one building. Everyone has lunch around the same time. I think it's very easy to meet people, which is really nice.
Really quickly before we get to the questions from our attendees, I want to ask our professors for just a brief statement on what you would say is a piece of advice you give to incoming law students who are interested in criminal law or a career in criminal law. Maybe something to keep a lookout for, maybe something they put on their radar, but a piece of advice for our attendees, and then I'll get to the questions I promised everybody in the Q&A box. Professor Dempsey, if I can come to you first.
So I would say my best advice for someone who thinks they want to do criminal law is to, as soon as possible, get into a position where you're in court. And if you want to be a defense attorney, as soon as possible, get into a position where you're engaging with clients and you're actually in there doing it. And if you think you want to be a prosecutor, as soon as possible, get yourself into a position where you're actually having to make decisions about what should be charged, what should be dismissed, what sort of plea should be negotiated, when should charges just, not be pursued at all. I think that it will either strike you as, yes, this is my calling, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, this is how I'm going to hopefully make the world a better place, or at least try to. And it will really speak to you in a very deep, compelling way. And it'll give you energy and fun, and it won't feel like work, right? And or it'll feel deeply uncomfortable, either because you don't like being in court, you're like uncomfortable sort of being in that position and publicly speaking and putting yourself out there, or you don't like the weight of responsibility of having to make these decisions as a prosecutor, or the weight of responsibility of having this client's life and liberty in your hands in some respects. Criminal law is a wonderful calling for people who are called to do it. And so the sooner you can find out whether it's really something that resonates with you, I think the better.
So I'll certainly echo and endorse what Professor Dempsey said, but what I would also say is there are more and more opportunities. While I'm a big fan of spending time doing the work in the most traditional sense, there are also more and more opportunities to be involved in the criminal justice system in a way that's not directly related to litigation. And if that's what's of interest to you, and sometimes even in the first year, where, as you've heard already described, your opportunities are a little bit different during your first summer, look for those opportunities, whether they're with outside groups, the Prison Society, or in Philadelphia Pulse, or Institutional Law Project, or let's not forget the Institute to Address Commercial Sexual Exploitation. Those are all opportunities to kind of see what's of interest to you. And if and when you decide this is really my thing, then look broadly. Look broadly in terms of the courses, but also those opportunities. And those opportunities can be outside the school or they can be inside the school. Professor Dempsey and I both do a lot of law reform work. Much of the Institute to Address Commercial Sexual Exploitation grew out of Professor Dempsey's scholarship and other work. And I've always got projects going on, whether it's criminal jury instructions where I've had students work with me, or back when I was on the Sentencing Commission, or work that I do inside prisons. And there are often opportunities to connect with people, whether it's your professors or people in the community, to really get a sense of what is it that I'm interested in. And if this is it, the sooner you start, the sooner you learn, and the sooner you make those connections, the better.
We're gonna do a little bit of rapid fire questions now from the Q&A box, just to make sure that we get through as many of these as possible. If you have any other questions or anything sort of pops up, please feel free to throw it into the Q&A box, just so that we'll be mindful of the time. We're around the 10-minute mark before trying to end the webinar for everybody here. But Matt, I'm coming to you for this first one. And this question says, I would like to do a lot of trial work. However, the thought of speaking in front of a judge and with such high stakes scares me a little. How does one prepare for that? Do you still experience nervousness while in court? And if you never experience nervousness, which I doubt is the case, then I'll go to somebody else to get a different take.
I feel like if you've never experienced nervousness before going into court, you need to go get checked. I still get nervous every single time I go in. I went into the grand jury to indict a felony this afternoon. I was nervous. I had a trial a couple weeks ago. Nervous. I had a hearing a couple weeks before that. Nervous. My former supervisor is now the head of the hate crimes unit here in Manhattan, so she's a really big deal. She's been practicing for 8 years now, I think. She's a machine. She's about to go into trial, and I was just talking to her the other day, and she's nervous. I don't think it ever changes. I think nerves are a good thing. It means that you care about it. And I think the way to maybe minimize those nerves having a negative effect on you is just trying to prepare as much as possible. That's something that I've had to work on, is being a little bit more organized and making sure that I have either scripts put together for like a questioning of a witness during a hearing or a trial, or just double, triple, quadruple checking my info and just going through my case file 1 or 2 more times just to make sure I have everything down, so I can kind of maybe not memorize it, but just have it in the back of my mind while I'm going.
Destynee and Noel, just briefly, I'll come to you for this question. What have been your favorite criminal law courses that you've taken so far? Maybe it's a course you're in currently. What comes to mind? And sort of maybe if you want to describe the subject area, as well as the professor who teaches the course.
I can start. I loved all of my criminal law classes. I really loved evidence, but I think my favorite would have been criminal justice, race, and the media. That's with Professor Ravid. He's also a criminal law professor. And that class was my favorite because you're able to choose any topic that relates to criminal justice, race, and the media. And then you write a long paper on it. So my paper was about 40 pages, and I chose to focus on how innocent defendants who were exonerated, how they were portrayed in the media, even though they were proved to be innocent, and whether conservative and liberal differed on how they showed their status of being exonerated. So it was really interesting for me being able to put so much time and spend the entire semester in this area of criminal law, and just like doing it independently and not having to go in any certain direction, and just being able to write as I freely chose.
Well, we already talked about the sentencing workshop, which truly has been one of my favorite classes I've taken so far at Villanova. And I actually was also going to say race, crime, and the media, which I was in with Destynee. It's a really interesting class. It's very different from, I think, a lot of the other classes you're going to take, because it is very paper focused and you kind of get to focus on one area. But I think additionally, what was interesting was seeing what other people's thoughts were, and just seeing how other people, I think somebody in our class, I think, wrote about how after the September 11th attacks, how that has impacted race and crime, and just topics that you didn't think about that your classmates thought about. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I've also loved all my criminal law classes thus far. The civil justice clinic has taken a lot of credits this semester, so I haven't taken as many criminal as I'd like to yet.
Professor Chanson, there are a couple questions in here about the sentencing workshop. The first is, how many openings are available? What's like the process for joining? Slash how difficult is it to get into, and if it's something for upperclassmen, 2Ls and 3Ls versus 1Ls, which we've already sort of talked about the rigidity of the 1L curriculum.
So it is a 2L, 3L course. There are 12 students a year, and historically it does fill. But it is entirely through whatever the normal registrar process is, fastest finger type of thing. So it's not an interview and selection. There's a recommended course to take before, but scheduling gets complicated. So it's not a formal prerequisite, and that is the sentencing survey class. The sentencing survey class, which I used to teach for a long time, but we had the opportunity for a wonderful judge from Philadelphia County, the Honorable Renee Cardwell Hughes, who now teaches that for us. We usually end up with a few people on the wait list. One thing that does kind of self-select some people out is, by necessity, we're pretty rigid about the dates and attendance. So we have those 2 long weekends. And if your best friend from elementary school is getting married that weekend and you need to be there, I hope you have a great trip, but there's nothing that I can do to replicate that. So it's a combination of pressing the button and making sure that you can fit those dates.
And then there are a few questions in here that I'll answer really quickly about our experiential learning at the law school. So when it comes to clinics, in terms of being a competitive process, you're gonna have to apply for 2 in particular, our CARES clinic and our law and entrepreneurship clinic. The other ones are sort of a lottery system where you'll be able to rank preferences, but there are going to be some factors that may determine or dictate, I guess, if somebody is going to get into a clinic in any given semester, particularly if somebody's in a concentration that relates to a clinic. They might have preference for getting into that clinic. And if we have, for example, a 3rd-year student who's about to graduate but hasn't yet done the experiential learning credit requirements, they will be put into a clinic, of course, to make sure that they graduate on time. So there are some things that'll, maybe change your ability to get into the clinic of your choice in the semester you want to be a part of it. But the goal is, of course, to get you into that clinic before you graduate. And the goal is to, over time, if you don't get it the first time, of course, for you to apply, be a part of the lottery again, to rank that clinic first, once again, so that you can be a part of it eventually. And then one other question here, I hope I didn't, let me see, about our clinics. Concentrations. We only have 5 concentrations at Villanova, so I'll just say that you don't actually have to decide on a concentration. Most of our students do not do a concentration, but they are in the areas of business law, health law, intellectual property, sports law, and then litigation and dispute resolution. So some individuals who want to do trial work, trial advocacy, may consider the litigation and dispute resolution concentration that's led by Professor Mooney, but you also don't have to do that at all. So I wouldn't necessarily look at Villanova as a school where you have to designate a concentration or sort of pick an area of law specifically. You really can play the field. You really can take as many or as few criminal law courses as you'd like, and we want our students to be able to have that flexibility while they're here. Professor Dempsey or Chanson, can either of you speak briefly about the content of the crimmigration course that was mentioned earlier, being at the intersection of 2 really important fields? And then the next question, it says, can you speak more in detail about the courses and experiential learning, which deals with white-collar crime? So maybe more so the courses might be more related to what you all can speak to.
So I can say something briefly about crimmigration, and then I'll pass white-collar crime on to Professor Chanenson. So I'm not an expert in immigration law, so don't quote me on any of this. And none of this is legal advice. I'm not even licensed in Pennsylvania, licensed in Illinois. But the immigration laws are intersecting with the criminal laws insofar as having a criminal conviction can have very serious consequences for someone's immigration status. Right. So if someone's trying to, get certain documentation, get certain status, maintain certain status, make their way toward citizenship, any of those sorts of immigration issues can be severely negatively impacted by engagement with the criminal legal system, and particularly convictions. So way back when I was still prosecuting, this sort of just wasn't even on people's radars. I remember a few times as a prosecutor, a smart defense attorney who knew what they were talking about would come to me and try to negotiate a certain deal to dismiss a certain charge or plead down to something else, and so that it wouldn't have the immigration implications for their client. And by and large, I was happy to do that. But I back then I didn't know anything about this, and it's become increasingly a more understood issue, known issue, such that any, as I mentioned before, anyone who's working as a criminal defense attorney nowadays really needs to be aware of the potential immigration implications for their clients before they would give them any sort of advice in terms of whether to accept a deal or go to trial or what have you.
And let me just add that while, of course, the crimmigration course goes into a great deal of depth, all of these issues have interconnected components. So in criminal procedure adjudication, we address the defense attorney's responsibility and the nature of effective assistance when it comes to counseling someone to accept a guilty plea, for example, on exactly the issues that Professor Dempsey has just mentioned. On the issue of white-collar crime, there are lots of related courses and opportunities, and this also connects up with the Girard-diCarlo Center for Ethics, Integrity, and Compliance. So white-collar crime, corporate and white-collar crime by Professor Nelson is kind of the core course, where you'll learn about the law, the doctrine, again, the practice, and the way in which those concerns have really had a tremendous impact on the way business is done. And among the courses that connect with that in a very real way, I think we already heard about the law of investigations, which is a terrific course, because you see lots of lawyers running either internal investigations, or if they become a prosecutor, running investigations as a general matter, but with a focus on what happens when you're talking about organizations. And similarly, we have a course on the law of compliance, which is, again, connected to white-collar crime. So you see lots of mutually reinforcing courses that will take something that is addressed but not in great depth in a more survey type course, and then really go and take a deep dive with it.
I know that we're past our time right now, but I do have one more question that I want to ask Matt and then our current students, just for a brief answer. The question is, what's the best advice that you have for a person coming into law school? I'll start with Matt, and then we'll go to Destynee and then Noel to wrap things up.
I would say unless you're like 1000% certain of what you want to do and you want to do it since you were 3 years old, I would say keep more of an open mind. I went into law school hoping to just kind of get my degree and go into lobbying, and then maybe move into politics. That's clearly not what I'm doing anymore. I'd be making a lot more money, which would be nice. And then after my first half of law school, we did the winter module, and we did a lot of M&A work, and I was like, oh, cool, M&A work would be really cool. And then when I finally did trial team during the summer going into 2L, that's when I really found out that I loved being in the courtroom. So I would say you're going to see a lot of your colleagues know what they want to do the second they get in at 1L, and it's not wrong, it's not abnormal for you to have no idea what you want to do. I probably decided that I wanted to be a prosecutor like fall of 3L year, like for certain, I should say. So there's no issue with not knowing exactly what you want to do right away. And I think a lot of people, especially first gen law students like me, struggle with that.
One piece of advice I would say is if you're like nervous about entering law school, or you feel like it's just going to be so much different things going on, just try and take a deep breath. Villanova, if you choose to go to Villanova, they have so many different tools to help you transition into the law school environment, whether that be through mentors, or that be the great professors here, or your fellow students who provide support for you. There's just such a great support system here, and it's nothing to really fret over before you begin. You'll figure it all out once you get to law school.
I'll echo what Matt and Destynee both said. Matt, you totally took mine of what I was going to say about just being open, but and Destynee, then that was kind of my second, and then you took it. So I think I guess I would just be patient with yourself when you enter. I feel like 1L year, everything's new. Nobody knows what they're doing, no matter how they think they know what they're doing. You can't prepare for it. I think just lean into the discomfort, whether it be even 2L, when you know how to do your classes, but now with clinic, yesterday was my first day in court with a client. I was so nervous, but just lean into it. And I think the whole law school experience, just lean into discomfort. Don't avoid things because they might make you uncomfortable. Don't avoid an internship opportunity or a class because you think you might be nervous or not sure about it. Nobody really knows totally what they're doing. So I think just knowing that everybody's in the same boat and just lean into it.
Well, awesome. I want to say thank you so much to our professors, to Matt and to Destynee and Noel for joining. Thank you so much for taking the time, to our attendees out of your evenings and afternoons, to join us to learn more about our criminal law offerings. If you have any questions that I can assist with moving forward, or to connect you with somebody that spoke on this evening's panel, please reach out and let me know. But I hope you all have a great evening, a great night, and thank you so much for taking the time to learn more about Villanova law.